Hello and welcome back to another episode of Not So Solitaire. Today we are joined by Fran, also known as Ep4 on the internet. I did my best to pronounce that for you, Fran.
That was pretty good, man. That's much better than I often get. So
sweet. I am Riker, also known as Dredge the Bed on the internet. I am joined by my wonderful co-host, Sam. Go ahead and say hi, Sam.
Hi, guys. Nice to meet you again. Thank you, Fran, for this time.
Yeah, we're definitely looking forward to this episode. It's exciting stuff. For those who don't recognize the name, you are also the Amulet Titan player in all formats, correct?
That's me, yeah. All formats is official. I have actually managed to get trophies in Legacy as well.
That's exciting stuff. I'm excited to be here because, I've been a lurker in a lot of your streams way back when, for a while. And how I stumbled onto you were playing, was it Astral Drift?
Wow, dude. Really?
That is the first time I ever stumbled onto you. And I loved the deck. And that's kind of what opened up me seeing what brewing is like. And I wanted to hear your thoughts on how your brews start and how they usually go.
Oh, dude, that's Astral Ren, Jesus. That deck was sure something. So that's funny. Yeah, no, so the way that I like to brew, I guess, is I just like cards. And I try to make those cards work. Sometimes they do. More often than not, they do not. But it's weird. Like, I'm not one of those aspiring spike kind of guys, Like, I'm not like a brewer at heart. I just brew out of necessity or boredom. But those are my reasons for brewing. For example, I usually have a very specific thing that I like to do, which is I like to play lands decks. For whatever reason, lands really appeal to me. I think I always show up everywhere if I can. I just ask people to play more lands in their decks, and that's sort of become a meme. The people know me, and like even Aspiring Spike has like an actual command in his channel that's !Fran, which asks him to put more lands in his deck. So basically, I like lands decks, so that's what called my attention from Amulet Titan, and that's usually what a lot of my brews end up looking like, at least in Legacy and Modern, which are the formats that I tend to play the most. So so I find cards that I like, and I find sometimes interactions. So Elvish Reclaimer is a card that I love. I always say that it's my invitational card. I even had somebody go ahead and basically Photoshop my face onto the art of Elvish Reclaimer, and I thought it was hilarious, and that became my background. So I really like that card, for example, and I tried to make it work in Modern when nobody even thought or remember that card had been printed. And it ended up being almost, I don't know if it was a tier 1 deck at one point, even with Green-White Reclaimer, which people insisted on calling like Celestial Lands or some crap like that. No, it was Green-White Reclaimer all along, baby. It just happened. So I think it's better if I use a couple of examples, I guess, so I can show what I'm talking about. Like the Astral Drift one, that was based around the fact that I loved Astral Slide. Like when I was a kid, I started playing back in Odyssey, and back then, I was a kid, and I just would go to the LGS, and there was this guy that had this Astral Slide deck back when Onslaught came out, when that was a tier deck, and he would beat me every time. Obviously, like my deck was terrible, so obviously he was beating me. But I thought it was very, very cool what he was doing. And when Modern Horizons, I think it was Modern Horizons 1, actually, the Astral Drift was printed, I had like a wish list, of cards that I wanted to be printed. And then not only did Astral Slide get printed, but it got slightly upgraded. So I was like, this is this is the dream. Let's do this. Then, Drennan 6 was also printed, and, kind of started from there. Like, I saw the interaction between like cycling lands and Astral Drift. And I was like, okay, how can I build this? And then I started to grab cards like Eternal Witness and like Wall of Blossoms. And okay, well, just kind of build it from the ground up. What does it need? Does it need a ramp? Okay, cool. So we try to find, okay, maybe Noble Hierarch or a Burst of Paradise. What does it need? What does it need? Like more cyclers. Okay, well, maybe we want to be adding some, like, how many of the cycling lands do we want? Like a bunch of this. And I usually don't really work too much with hyper, or like with hyperbole is not the word I'm looking for. With like preconceived rules. I'm a lot more of put the deck together, see if it looks good, and then like slam my face against the wall, like play it. And I don't care whether I win or lose. I care about how the deck feels, like if the deck feels like it's smooth, like it's doing something powerful, then I will, try to push in that direction. And if it doesn't, then I'll try to figure out why that's the case. So what's going on? Am I missing too many land drops? Okay, so I have to fix that. Am I running out of win conditions? Okay, well I have to fix that. Like am I flooding too much? Well, maybe I have to cut a land or two. Do I need some late game? Okay, so how can I work that out? So with that deck, that's how it worked out. With Green White Reclaimer, it was very different actually. That was brewing out of necessity. So what was happening right there is, I wouldn't even say desperation in this case. So Amulet was very bad at that point because this is the time where Udo was legal alongside Mystic Sanctuary, and people were jamming 4 copies of Aether Gust in their sideboard. So because of that, you would cast Primeval Titan, and it would get gusted, and then the following turn, Mystic Sanctuary would get back the Aether Gust, and then they would Cryptic loop Aether Gust every single turn. And you were spending 6 mana, and your opponent was only spending 2 mana to answer your Primeval Titan, while also like getting an Uru in play or like stuff like that. And I just could not beat it. Like I tried and I tried and I tried so many. I tried Quagganoth, man. Like I went real deep to try to beat Aether Gust, and I just couldn't.
The Aether Gust came from Field of the Dead, right? Titan just had Field of the Dead, and it became a very terrifying deck to play against.
Well, Aether Gust was just busted in the format. Yeah. Like everybody was jamming Uros, everybody was jamming Omnaths. Like that's what the format looked like. So Aether Gust was like a main deckable card in Modern at that point. So I'm just trying to cast 6/6s into Aether Gust, and I'm just like, I can't win. Like I literally cannot win. So I was, desperate, talking to chat, and somebody in chat said, haha, you can Aether Vial Primeval Titan. And I'm like, well, I mean, I'm that desperate, so let's figure this out. So I build a deck with Aether Vial and Primeval Titan. This actually happened. And it was green-white, and I started to, I threw in Elvish Reclaimer, I threw in Thalias in the early time of the deck, and I was working with trying to build a Field of the Dead deck. So the concept was play Elvish Reclaimer and try to use like the combination with Flax and Sotrocare so that your Reclaimer starts to ramp. And then you're basically now trading up, right? Because you are spending 1 mana to play your Reclaimer, and then your opponent needs to answer it somehow. And even if they have the Aether Gust, cool, they Aether Gusted your Reclaimer, they're not going to Aether Gust your big threats. So Aether Vial allowed us to, kind of work around Aether Gust and all of these things, but turns out that the engine was really good. Elvish Reclaimer plus Flagstones, working your way up towards Field of the Dead, was really, really powerful. So what happened is, I put the core together, and I played like a couple of leagues, and it was bad, and then I managed to get a trophy. And then I play again, and I managed to get another trophy. And then I get another trophy, and at one point I'm like, wait a second. Like, is this like for real? Like, is this actually happening? Like, I had like an almost 80% win rate with the deck. I'm like, what's going on here? Why are people losing to me? And yeah, what happened was like the engine was really, really good. Obviously, the other rounds were terrible. Like they were, just kind of like a it started as a meme, and it turns out that it was a meme, unsurprisingly. But somebody just grabbed that same idea, cut the vials, played real cards instead, and all of a sudden, the deck could compete. The deck could compete with all of the Euro decks. And back at that time, it was like, if you would look at any top 8s from that time, it was like 4 or 5 Euro decks and like 1 or 2 green-white reclaimers and like some random combo or something. So like all the top 8s looked something like that. So it was actually a deck that was able to compete with that. But in that case, the Bruin was just like, I like these cards and like I'm desperate. So that's how that one came together.
It definitely gives hope for the brewers out there. I do got to mention real quick. I know that it is sacrilegious that we are talking to a lands player when most of our community is no lands. That is our thing. We are on the opposite end of that spectrum. We don't like lands, but it's so fun to do these episodes with people like you and get to hear all these different sides of how you play and how you brew and et cetera. And I think Sam had something you wanted to chime in here.
Yeah, thank you, Riker. So, Fran, you, of course, are very well known because you're the Amulet Titan player. And as a brewer also, for sure, Amulet Titan is one of the decks that most like transformation had during the meta in Modern. Like we're talking from a deck that has been playing Summer Bloom, Hive Mind, Karn. Then came Ursa Saga. Well, of course, Dryad. I know that you were one of the first you saw the Cultivator Colossus, and you started brewing with that. Mm-hmm. If you can, like, perhaps choose a moment of this different Amulet Titan decks that you had, which was the one that you said, like, I really enjoyed this moment of Amulet Titan, regardless of which were the cards that were legal at that moment right now?
So that's an interesting question because I really, really enjoyed it when I just learned about it. Like, because when I just learned about it, and I always tell this story because I think it's really cool. So it's Pro Tour Born of the Gods, and it's round 7, and there's like a Hall of Famer playing against somebody else. We don't care about that. Like if you go to YouTube, you go to round number 7, and don't look at the main match. Look at the backup match. Okay, so they move to the backup match, and it's Matthias Hunt playing against like a back then blue-white-red control. Jeskai didn't even exist just yet. And what's going on is Matthias like tanks for a second at one point, and he casts a Primeval Titan. And he has like all of these lands that I have no idea what's going on. And I had just gotten back into playing Magic. I learned that Modern is a format, and I'm just like frantically just going on like Google, and just every single land that I see, I'm like, what the hell is that? Like I have like one tab playing the match, and the other tab is just like Googling every single card because I have no idea what all of these cards do. And then he plays a Primeval Titan. His opponent mana leaks. He thinks for a second, and he exiles a Simian Spirit Guide to pay for mana leak. And I'm just like, oh, that's it. This is what I want to be doing. And then like he does all these cool things, and then obviously he just completely obliterates his opponent after that. So that was the first time that I saw the deck, and I thought like, this is insane. Like this is absolutely crazy. I love everything that's going on here. And it was really cool to play it at that point because nobody took it seriously. Like nobody understood what the deck was capable of doing. So that's how I got into MTGO. I bought I bought Amulet. Like I just went to the MTGO store because I didn't know any better. So I bought like a bunch of tickets on the MTGO store, and I bought Amulet Titan, and then I started grinding dailies. And before I realized I just have like all this collection because I'm just like 3-1 or 4-0 in every single daily that happens. And I'm just like, well, this is great. Like, why aren't people taking this deck seriously? And then of course, like Justin Cohen actually goes ahead and gets second at the Pro Tour. And obviously everybody's like, wait, is this deck like the real deal actually? So basically playing it when nobody understood whatever what's going on was great. Like that was a lot of fun back then. But there's a lot of nostalgia involved with that. Like that deck was really clunky. It was also very unfocused, and it just didn't really know what it was doing. Like it was a deck built where it felt like the deck itself was not aware of how good it was, if that makes sense. So it was built with like 28 lands, which was very little. Like we should have been playing many more lands at that point. We should be playing 31, probably maybe more. But we didn't know any better. Like that's what it was. We had like Serum Visions and Ancient Steerings. It was so bad. But that was a lot of fun there. But if I had to choose my favorite time for playing Amulet, it would probably be before Dryad. I think that Dryad was... so the way I see Amulet is it used to be, and I said it with a little bit of sadness, but it used to be like a toolbox deck. Like I always looked at it as a toolbox deck. So if you looked at Amulet main decks and sideboards, like sometimes you were main decking a Hornet Queen if the metagame called for that. You were main decking a Reclamation Sage. You were you had Rurik Thar in the sideboard. You had Dragon Lord Dromoka in the sideboard. You had like all of these Chameleon Colossus against Death Shadow. You had access to all of these very sweet toolbox targets that you could find off of Summoner's Pact, and you could like get value that way. You had all of this, obviously, which we still use, like the land suite that you could tutor for with Tolaria West. You could tutor for Engineered Explosives with Tolaria West. You could tutor for Walking Ballista. So all of these things were very, very cool, and that is pretty much gone due to power creep these days. Like the deck is too many good cards have been printed nowadays, so the deck is a lot more combo focused now. You have your Dryads, you have your Valakuts, you have your Ursa Sagas, you have like all of these cards are obviously just ridiculously good. So the whole toolbox aspect of the deck just it doesn't make sense anymore because you could just be playing better cards altogether. So that's what everybody's doing. But it was really fun to play the deck. I would say the most fun for me would be when before it came back in a big way. Like there's this event which I think Justin Cohen was playing, and I think Sam Black was playing Amulet, and that's when he added main deck Walking Ballista. And that's when I think it was the most fun. At least the one that when I had the most
toolbox.
And you would, yeah, because it was really cool, right? Like I was so down the rabbit hole at that point. So you had like all of these game plans, that were super, super convoluted. Like, for example, against Blue-White Control, you just wanted to beat them down with like random Azuzas and Sakura Tribe Scouts. And then your end game wasn't really to resolve Primeval Titan, but it was to play Cavern on Construct to play like a huge Walking Ballista that you would eventually draw and just ping them to death. Because like Primeval Titan will get like Path to Exile or stuff like that, so you couldn't really push damage through very easily with Prime Time. So you had like all of these weirdo game plans that you wanted to execute, and you would like pivot from one game plan to the next one depending on how the board state looked like. Like your opponent tapped out maybe a little too low, and now you're okay. I'm a combo deck now, and you're like, okay, your opponent refuses to tap out. Cool, sweet. I'm a ramp deck. Here's a ramp spell. Do you want to counter it? No, because you want to save it for the big threat. Sweet, awesome. So I'm gonna ramp, and now like I have this bait spell. I have this other bait spell. Like. It was very interesting to try to work. And again, like in a context where the deck was not really respected. The deck wasn't really considered to be very good. So I think that's probably like my favorite time to play it. And probably the second favorite time a little bit more recently is with Once Upon a Time.
Oh, gross.
It was pretty good right there. And let's say that Once Upon a Time treated me very well.
Yeah.
I did want to ask, and I do ask this for all whenever we talk with deck specialists, is I've personally tried to play Titan. Titan is a very difficult deck to completely grasp. What would you recommend to new players if they decide to pick up Amulet Titan? What would be your best way to approach learning the deck?
Don't be afraid is what I would say first. So I think that there's a misconception that the deck is hard to play. Really, it's not. It's not as hard to play. It's just weird to play. So in the same way that Dredge is hard to play, if that makes sense. That's that. It's a very, very on purpose comment. But what I'm trying to say is it plays Magic in a very different way. Like the things that matter change very drastically, right? Let's say that if you're playing a fair game, right? Like your opponent turn 1 Inquisitions, your Snapcaster Mage, and you're like, oh, that sucks, Here, if your opponent Inquisitions your Explorer, you're just like, whatever. Like maybe if they thought it's your Primeval Titan, it's like cool. Like it's crazy the amount of times that my opponents go like turn 1 Inquisition and they take my Amulet, and I'm like, sweet, that's the only way that I win. If you take my Amulet with an Inquisition instead of taking this Explorer or Tireless Tracker or like something else that actually, that matters in that specific matchup. So I think that the deck is very, very misunderstood, even to this day, even though the deck, it's literally the only deck that since 2014 has been a consistent member of the modern metagame. It's the only deck. Like if you look at the deck list from Modern from 2013 or like 2014, 2015, there's going to be Amulet there, and it's probably going to be the only deck. Every other deck has been just power crept out of the format. Even stuff like Affinity like doesn't exist anymore. Like it's that Affinity was also like a mainstay, but like it's disappeared with the banning of Mox Opal. Technically, you could say like Blue-White is also being consistently there, so that's another, or Burn. But like Burn is not really a deck anymore because, there's just so much incidental life gain everywhere, and like you need your cards to line up well. It's like Blue-White, yeah. If you're Wafotapa, I guess you can consider Blue-White to be good. But if you're anybody else, Blue-White is not really that good anymore. But Amulet was consistently a member of the metagame and a force to reckon with, except when people know that it's good, right? Like that's obviously the worst time to be playing Amulet. But yeah, so what I would say is you just need to not be afraid. Like you just need to understand how the deck works. There's a lot of shortcutting as well, which happens that is weird. But once you understand how it works, like if you have an Azusa and an Amulet and a Bounce Land, that's 6 mana. Like that kind of shortcutting makes things a lot easier to think on the fly. And the other thing, and this is probably like the number one thing that actually not only new Amulet players, but also not super new, but like medium Amulet players also make, is they will do things and think about them later. And this deck is crazy punishing if you do that. Before you play your first land on turn 1, you need to, in your mind, know what turn 3 and turn 4 look like. Because the amount of times that you lose to just playing the wrong land on turn 1, because that, if you had played this other land, you would have been able to set up a Titan 1 turn earlier, and obviously Titan on turn 4 and turn 5 are very different things. So I think that thing is very important. And also, well, like what do you get from the Titan? That's also very, very important. That, and I think that a lot of people very often mess that up as well, leaving themselves dead to something that they could have played around very easily.
That's what catches me is if I resolve a Titan, the decision trees are just all over the place when there's one usually correct answer for every situation. Sometimes it can be difficult to identify.
Exactly. So, but again, like once you get familiar with the scenarios and you get familiar with what the best course of actions look like, more often than not, the answers are fairly simple. Like they're not necessarily simple, but they're usually the same, if that makes sense. Opponent has removal. Well, don't try to haste. Like if they're representing like Solitude or whatever, like don't try to haste your Titan because you can get blown out. What do you do instead? You set up your next Titan. So you get Tolaria West and Semi-Growth Shimmer, and you bounce and you transmute that to get another Summoner's Pact. Or like go for Urza's Saga, or like your opponent can Holy Kid your Titan. Well, go get Bojuka Bog. All of these things, they're once you know what the situations look like and when you find yourself in those situations, and how you get yourself out of those situations, then things get a little bit easier. So there's a lot of repetition, basically.
That's very good. Thank you for diving in so good into the archetype. I think that something that we really what Titan makes it so good is it's so difficult to interact with lands, and everything that you do basically is with lands. And now that you have this experience through the different archetypes in Amulet Titan, when you're talking about Amulet Titan, you still express yourself a lot like a toolbox, because this is something that you really like enjoy. Like just now that you like were giving some example about play patterns shows that you're still thinking the deck like as a pure toolbox deck with all the lands that you have available in your deck. So that's really awesome and interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, like it's just how it's just a matter of how you approach the deck, and like what you're saying about the toolbox is like it's even to an extent true to this day with Karn the Great Creator. Yeah. Like I really like Karn the Great Creator and Amulet Titan if the metagame calls for it, which I think that right now it kind of does. So it's nice. I love playing Karn. I was one of the first to try Karn in Amulet, and I still think that it's very, very good when the metagame calls for it. But yeah, that's another thing that people really misevaluate. When you're playing with Karn the Great Creator, particularly in Amulet, like it's very different than playing with Karn the Great Creator in, let's say, like Mono Green Tron or like Eldrazi Tron even. And there are not that many other Karn decks, so that's kind of as far as it goes. But it's just a very, very different approach, like a different way that you need to, a different subset of things that you want to prioritize when you see a card like Karn the Great Creator.
And so, from when do you think actually is a good? When do you feel, or basically, we're just understanding when it's the best moment to play Amulet Titan. When do you feel that the meta is kind of unprepared for this strategy?
Well, nowadays, never is really the answer. Because like you were saying, lands are hard to interact with. Well, but Magus of the Moon is everywhere. And Magus of the Moon is hard to interact with for Amulet. So it goes both ways. And, I've been Magus of the Moon out of 4 or 5 color decks. So nobody's safe from the Magus. But yeah, so like if people are playing Blue-Red Murktide, that's a really hard matchup, for example. Blue-Black Mill is very, very bad, like close to unwinnable, which is really funny. Like, that's not really a deck that any deck has ever been scared of.
We do.
We are scared of it. We play.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, well, Belcher and Oops All Spells is our thing, and Surgical is very mean. And take this for note. Mill decreases the amount of damage a Belcher will deal.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it's the amount of cards in our deck, and if they get us under 20 cards, a Belcher isn't lethal.
That's hilarious. I actually hadn't thought about that right now.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no. Any combo deck does not like Mill.
That's funny. Well, there you go. So yeah, so if you Surgical or Primeval Titan, things get a lot harder. So those are the kind of decks that you want to see. Infect historically was far and away the worst matchup for Amulet. So those are the decks that you want to dodge. Now, if people are playing like Jund, if they're playing stuff like Burn is almost a buy for Amulet these days. Mono Green Tron is an absolute joke. Eldrazi Tron also is very good. So when people are trying to play those kind of decks, Amulet goes over the top of them. And when people are playing a lot of like 4-color, blue-white, that's where you want to buckle up. Because those are the matchups that are very skill-intensive. And they tend to be very long, with tons of decisions. And where if you play the wrong land on turn 2, and you didn't make that extra construct when you could have, like that's the difference between winning and losing the game. You know what I'm saying? So those are the good matches, like those are the ones that I'm actually most excited to play.
As we draw to the end of this episode, it was great having you on and getting to pick your Amulet Titan player mind about decisions, and especially brewing. Love to hear the brewing. I did want to mention ways that our listeners can find you, and I know you are a part of another podcast that you are somewhat active in. It's called Mishra's Babble.
Mishra's Babble. Yeah, it's with me and Spider Space, which you may know, and Everos. But it was weird. Like I had a kid recently, and scheduling has been kind of a nightmare. So we kind of had to go into a little bit of a hiatus, and now things have been hard with Evan in terms of scheduling. So Spider Space and I are picking it back up, but it's a bi-weekly podcast. We are, in all the apps. If you want to find us on Spotify and all those places.
I'll definitely
Mishra's Babble.
I'll link it in the description down below for this episode. People can also find you on Twitch at fpawlusz, correct?
That's true. fpawlusz. I always have to spell it out because it's hard otherwise. But yeah, I'm not streaming that often these days, again, because of baby commitments. But what I've been doing is I've been making YouTube videos a lot. So I've been tackling the YouTube video life.
All right. Any last thoughts from either of you two before we close out this episode?
From my side, just thank you, Fran, for your time. It has been really a blast to have also your presence and actually your experience for the deck. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, please, my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. This was a lot of fun, and yeah, it's nice to see that there's some degenerate gamers out there that they have a good place to hang out.
We are a combo haven. But thank you for listening, and thank you for joining us, Fran. And we will see you guys in our next episode.